I'll move that we approve August 21st minutes.
Okay,
Second.
all right, thank you very much. All approved? Say aye.
Aye.
All right, passes unanimously, thank you. The Central Avenue BRT Transit-Oriented Development Strategic Plan. Al, would you bring us up to speed on that?
Actually, it's going to be tag team me and Al.
Okay.
I'll be playing the role of Cassandra Borchers
Okay, all right.
in tonight's theatrical production.
All right, DOD Strategic Plan Summary. Go ahead, Al.
So this is an action item to approve a contract, which I'm excited about, a consultant contract with Kimley Horn and Associates, Inc. And I'll tell you just in a second about the procurement. But a little bit of background on this. This is for transit-oriented development, strategic planning services to Kimley Horn. About a year ago, or a little more than a year ago, the federal government put out a new funding source for transit-oriented development assistance. And PSTA partnered with Ford Pinellas and City of St. Petersburg and South Pasadena and St. Pete Beach and applied for TOD assistance with our BRT corridor. And we were very excited to receive $1.2 million. We competitively got $1.2 million, which was the most of any city in the United States for this, which was great. And what this will do, what this funding is intended to do, is to provide planning assistance, land use planning assistance to, really the audience is the City of St. Petersburg, South Pasadena, St. Pete Beach, and the planning side of Ford Pinellas, which is the Pinellas Planning Council, to develop supportive policies for transit-oriented development. Also, the economic development corporations, like the St. Pete EDC and the department in the city to support economic development along the transit corridor to sort of capitalize on the investment that we're making in the BRT there. You'll see in the action item, it's for, what you're recommending approval is to not to exceed $1.2 million, which is what we got for the grant. And that was another great thing about the grant, is that they agreed to allow the staff time by the City of St. Pete, Ford Pinellas, PSTA to count as the match. So there's really no expenditure of any additional dollars, local dollars for this work. You'll see in there that we are establishing the contract, though, with Kimley Horn, though, not to exceed $3 million, and that's to allow for other corridors, perhaps in the future, if they were to receive additional funds. Probably not, maybe not necessarily PSTA, but Ford Pinellas or the City of St. Pete could use this contract to do other corridors in the future, but that would have to come back to the PSTA board for approval. So Al, you want to give the lowdown on the exciting procurement?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. I'm Al Burns, Director of Procurement. In June of this year, we released a RFQ, a request for qualifications. It was in compliance with PSTA's procurement policies and the Florida Consultants Competitive Negotiations Act, or CCNA statute. The solicitation was posted on PSTA and DemandStar websites. On July 16th, we received 4 proposals, one from HDR, Kimley Horn, Renaissance Group, and WSP. The evaluation committee that we had was very diverse. It consisted of members from PSTA, City of St. Petersburg, Ford Pinellas, and South Pasadena. The evaluation committee met the first time. Then we pared it down to the competitive range, which consisted of two offerors. From those 2 firms, we asked that they give presentations. The presentations that they gave expounded on their experience and the detail of the understanding of the scope of work. And we also asked questions from the project managers and the deputy project manager, where they gave us their definitions of what the project is about and their understanding of the project. After the presentations, Kimley Horn scored highest with a total points of 871 and WSP 821. On the 21st of last month, I requested Kimley Horn provide me the FDOT audited financials, and now we're in the process of concluding negotiations. Kimley Horn and all the firms that are part of their team have the capacity to perform the work. Additionally, they're not excluded on SAMS.gov. Because of the contract value and potential contract value, I had an analysis done, I ran a report off of Duns and Bradstreet's, and Kimley Horn is in good financial standing as well. The fiscal impact, the initial $1.2 million task work order is funded through FTA TOD pilot program, like Brad explained. In lieu of the cash match, the PSTA for Pinellas in the city of St. Pete, we will track all of our man hours and apply it towards this grant. Any further task work orders to be funded with future allocations will be brought to the PSTA board through the budget and regular board approval process as necessary, just in case, like Brad said, the upset limit is $3 million, and if anyone else wants to use it, we'll come back to the board to get approval. Finally, the recommendation is recommend approval of a 5-year contract to Kimley Horn and Associates Incorporated for TOD strategic services with a contract not to exceed of $3 million and an initial scope of the Central Avenue BRT TOD strategic plan of $1.2 million. If there's any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer.
Yeah, hi, Al. Under the procurement, the evaluation committee, St. Pete Beach didn't participate, is that correct?
St. Pete Beach did not participate. However, I did reach out to St. Pete Beach and I had an in-depth conversation with him. And because of conflicts of schedule, he was not able to attend.
Okay.
But we did reach out and had conversation with
They
them.
were invited, but the calendar didn't work, yeah.
Okay, I got you, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Al, how long is this going to take for completion?
I want to say the period of performance is 180 days, but right after the meeting, I'll look at the scope of work and just reconfirm. But I think it's 180 days is the period of performance for the study.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Do I hear a motion?
I'll recommend approval of the 5-year contract with Kimley Horn and Associates.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, and then our next, just stay right there, Al, because you're going to talk about contract modifications.
The reason I developed this action item here is we at one of the finance meetings, I think it was 2 months ago, when we brought to you the Uber and the United Taxi, and there were some minor contract modifications that had to be done, and I think at that time the committee, they wanted things streamlined. So I reached out to, I looked and I said, hey, we do a lot of things in procurement that pertain to contracts, but they're more on the administrative side of the house. So with that, in that spirit, I put this action item together. And the action item reads, recommend authorizing the CEO to approve contract modifications that have no financial impact and no impact to the contract length to previously awarded contracts. PSTA has approximately 130 contracts that my team manages. While these contracts are enforced, there sometimes comes a need for contract modifications. Recent examples of these were with Uber and Lyft, which simply slightly modified the hours of operation, or PSTA's contract with ICMA to allow employees certain access to their own funds for loan purchases. In an effort to be cognizant of the board's time and save legal review expense, staff seeks approval to allow the CEO the ability to make changes to contracts that the board has approved as long as they are non-substantial, have no fiscal impact, and no adjustment to the length/term of the agreement. Procurement procurement has a very good working relationship with general counsel and the BMO office, and I seek guidance from them if I have any questions or any doubts. So what I'm asking, and I'm being very sincere in this, is that you allow staff to do just day-to-day operational stuff without having to bring things before committee. I'll just remind you that this has no impact to the fiscal or the dollar value of a contract, the term or the length of time of the contract, or any what I call substantial changes. If there's any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer.
Questions, anyone? Yeah, go ahead.
So I think it's a great idea. My only concern is that over time, there's a lot of changes that change maybe some of our understanding of what's happening in a particular contract. And as we're in the community and discussing what PSTA is doing, it may no longer be accurate. So what I'd like to see is if this does pass, is to see if we can have like a running tally of what changes are made as they're made and reported back to the board or the finance committee on a periodic basis, a quarterly basis, just so we're up to date as to what changes have been made, and we're in the loop.
I think that's an excellent idea, and I'll talk to my boss, Debbie, and maybe we can incorporate that in our contracts report. And if there's any contract modifications that are done, we just list those at the bottom of the report.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Josh. Good point. Anybody else? Okay, do I hear a motion?
I'll recommend authorizing,
Well, hold on.
That's okay, he can finish making
Okay.
his motion if you'd like.
Okay, go ahead, Richard.
I'll recommend authorizing the CEO to approve contract modifications that have no financial impact or no impact to the contract length to previously awarded contracts. I'll second.
Okay.
I was just going to add, since I
Sorry.
stayed for your meeting, just two quick points of clarification, which is just that first, legal does still review the contract amendment before it is signed by Brad. Brad looks for our signature, just like the chair looks for our signature on contracts that are approved by the board. So legal would still review the form of the amendments. And the point that you made was correct. The law in Florida is that Brad cannot expand the scope of the contract without the PSTA board approving it. So this is really just designed to account, like Al said, for either minor contract changes or changes that would not affect the scope of the contract, and associated with that, and important to the board for the budget hearings we just did, the price of the contract. So with that in line, and as Al mentioned, we actually just had, part of the catalyst for this is an additional grant that PSTA received to be able to do, use more money toward its mobility on demand sandbox grant effort. So with the supplement of an additional grant, that's money that we could use, but instead of having to continue to bring more contract modifications back to the PSTA board and to committee for approval, so.
Okay. So just for clarification, then, Commissioner Schulman's suggestion is already incorporated into this. We don't have to.
Yes,
we don't have to
correct.
make an amendment to the.
No, there's no need to amend the motion. I just did want to be sure
The idea
that,
of reporting,
Oh,
keeping tally of
report, yes.
reporting to the board, yeah,
Yeah.
we had already thought
Okay.
to do that. That's a good idea.
All right, so then is it okay with the mover and seconder that that modification be added to your motion? Okay.
Yes.
All in favor? Aye. Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Thanks, Al. Great
Thank you,
job.
Mr. Chair.
Appreciate it. Hi, Diane.
They're scared when you come up to the podium.
You should be. Good evening, Diane Randall, Director of Risk Management. I have two claims that I'd like to discuss tonight. The first, we're asking for authority to settle with David Raydell, and the action that's being requested is to recommend board approval of settlement authority of $50,000. This accident occurred on March 29th, 2018, when a PSTA bus traveling north on 37th Street failed to yield right-of-way at a stop sign, and a collision occurred with a vehicle that was on 54th Avenue South. Mr. Raydell's airbags did deploy on impact. He refused treatment at the scene. However, he presented to urgent care the next day with shortness of breath and left-sided chest pain and was diagnosed with a collapsed left lung. He was referred to the emergency room, and while in the hospital, he also had some complications of atrial fibrillation. He had no prior history of heart problems, so that was attributed to the accident as well. He does suffer from additional medical conditions, but his physicians all stated that these injuries appeared to be causally related to our accident. His medical bills are approximately $77,100. So we're requesting settlement authority of $50,000 to resolve this claim without further litigation, as it is currently in litigation. The fiscal impact is $50,000, which is within our established claim reserve. So our recommendation is for the board to approve settlement with Mr. Rydell.
Okay. Do you want us to talk about each one separately?
Yes, I think that would probably be
All
best.
right. Any questions on this one?
None on this?
Okay. We're approving 50,000. Medical bills are approximately 77,000. Is PSTA paying a portion of that, or is this coming from his auto policy? How is that being done?
He does have a uninsured motorist claim, and this is in coordination with them. And as part of the settlement, we are only settling because the carrier has agreed to waive subrogation rights against us. So this will be $50,000 and done for us. And then I can't tell you how much the uninsured motorist settlement is.
And we'll have the appropriate waiver signed so that there can't be any further.
Absolutely.
charges.
And we are represented on this case as it is currently in litigation,
Okay,
so.
all right. Any other questions? Okay. So I need a motion on the approval of $50,000 for Mr. Rydell.
Move approval.
Second?
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously, thank you very much, okay. And then the second case,
Okay.
Diane?
The second case happened on March 12th of this year, when a bus was at a bus stop for passengers to disembark. Mr. Harvey, who is the claimant in this claim, exited through the back doors, but before leaving, he yelled out, "Getting bike." He went to the bus shelter to put some things that he had, some bags and things that he had down. And the bus operator was paying attention to an elderly passenger that was exiting through the front of the bus, and started, after she exited, he started to accelerate away from the bus stop. Mr. Harvey started to chase the bus and hit the side of the bus as he wanted his bicycle. The operator did not stop, and Mr. Harvey continued to chase the bus. He appears to lose his balance and falls in the street, and the rear wheels ran over his lower leg and ankle. He was transported via ambulance to Bayfront Hospital, where he was diagnosed with a left femur fracture, left tibial fracture, left tibial shaft fracture, and a closed fracture of the left tarsometatarsal joint. So it's lower leg and foot. He's already undergone multiple surgeries to repair the fractures and has had skin grafts as a result of the injury. His total medical bills to date are approximately $488,000, and it is anticipated for him to have further medical care to include additional surgeries. We're requesting settlement authority in the amount of $200,000 to resolve this claim without litigation. This case is currently not litigated, although he is represented. Our fiscal impact is $100,000, as we have a $100,000 self-insurance retention, and then our excess carrier would pay the additional $100,000. So we're recommending approval of the settlement with Mr. Monty Harvey.
Any questions?
Yeah,
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
got questions.
Maybe Mr. Bradford could answer these for me.
Yeah, I do have some questions on this concerning our operation here. And Would I address these to you, Mr. Bradford, or how do we want to do this? What I want to make sure is that we're on the right page here when it comes to somebody getting off the bus and going to retrieve their bicycle. And I understand he went out the back exit, though, if I'm not mistaken, which
Correct.
typically a rider would, you know, yeah, tell the operator, hey, I'm going to get my bike, but I guess he yelled it. How did we determine that he yelled it? Did we play tapes back or something like that? Okay.
Yeah, right. Through the surveillance video, we
Right.
were able to kind of go through and, you know, dissect it second by second.
And did the operator seem to know that he said anything, or do we know that?
You know, so the operator claims not to have heard it before pulling away from the curb.
Okay.
And then didn't see him when, I guess, the gentleman started to kind of chase the bus down.
Right, but was the guy like real close to the bus, trying to knock on the door or anything like that?
When he caught up to the bus on foot,
Yeah.
running, yes, he got close enough to actually
Did
try
the
to
did
knock
the
the
operator
side of the-
was able to look over and see him, do you know, or?
all simultaneously as it happened, caught up to the bus, running, knocking on, you know, the vehicle at the same time. You know, this was one of those things that, you know, we have opportunity, and the union always tells us to, after the fact, go through in slow motion and dissect things. And they always try to say, if you look through the operator's lens, these things happen in real time, they happen all at once, and it kind of is the perfect storm of disaster. You know, without going into so much detail, we were very concerned about this. Many meetings with the union, took significant action, is all I'll say, as much as we could, you know, and we're still kind of dissecting and looking for ways to prevent this from happening, including just raising overall awareness, 360 degrees of just making sure that operators pay attention, you know.
Yeah, well, and I totally understand how chaotic it can get.
Sure.
When people are disembarking, and you know, I do understand that. I just want to make sure that we are, and I'm sure from what you've.
Oh,
told me, we
absolutely,
are.
absolutely.
All right, well,
You know, and it's an expensive case study, but it's one that we hold up to.
Thankful the man didn't lose his life.
Absolutely, of course. And, you know, and hopefully you all are reassured that, you know, these are the worst of the worst things, and that keep me up at night, and you go through and you dissect and you say, how to, you know, teachable moment.
Right.
Doesn't even do it justice for what this is, and it's a very expensive teachable moment, but you use this case example to the union and to the operators saying, how do we prevent this?
I got you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other questions? James, I'm going to assume, just to piggyback off what Commissioner Cox said, that we're doing a lot of training on making sure that we're allowing adequate time for people to get off the bus, and also to make sure that this kind of thing doesn't happen. I mean, it's just a horrible accident for this person. I mean, I assume he's lost time from work and
Yes, sir.
whatever else is involved here. I try to check the newspaper regularly to make sure if I know about these kinds of things, but I don't recall seeing this in the paper, so I guess it was handled rather low-key. But if he's got to have additional surgeries and things like that, I don't see anything in here about lost wages or that kind of thing. But is this going to end this, is what I'm getting at? Is this something that's going to continue on for a long period of time, and we may have additional claims?
This is the maximum. This is our limit. This is our limit of coverage as a sovereign agency. Sovereign immunity limits are $200,000 per person, $300,000 per accident. So this is the most that he could possibly collect from us without a claims bill, which is unlikely.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Do I hear a motion?
And I just wanted to speak to your point of ensuring, moving forward, the operator's awareness, and you're absolutely right, Commissioner Barkley, on that. It's important for us to make sure that we as management convey to the operators, whatever the schedule is, that safety is paramount, and that folks have plenty of time to board safely, to exit safely, and that the main thing to do is to make sure that everything's cleared. And so we have to actually repeat that message and say, no one's going to get in trouble for being late, for being behind on schedule or whatever. The first matter of business is to make sure we keep that awareness up. So, with thousands of interactions every day, sometimes you get these and it's just a painful reminder that, hey, this is not something we can make a message several times a year. We have to be on point every single day. So I just wanted to speak to the point you brought up.
One other question, and then I don't want to hold this meeting up, but one other question isn't there a sort of a checklist that the drivers follow so that they sort of keep track of who puts a bike on the front of the bus, and when they get on, maybe the guy with a red shirt or the guy, with a funny hat or whatever it is, some kind of way that they can keep track of who put a bike on the front of the bus, so that when that person's getting off, they know, the driver knows that person's going to take an extra minute to retrieve his bike off the front.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And there are techniques, and I think what we have to do is revisit them, whether it's in the form of a memo or training. But you're absolutely right. And it's just something that I think, especially if you're driving out there 10, 20 years, you don't want complacency to set in. Sometimes it can be hard if you have a full bus and, to remember whose bike is who, and especially if they feel like they're kind of have gotten out unnoticed. But to your point, absolutely, there are techniques for everything. And that's just something we need to just make sure we do a better job on.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, did I have a motion in a second?
I'll recommend the board approve settlement with Mr. Harvey.
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Diane. Thanks, James. Okay. Monthly financial report. Oh, Debbie, you're filling all the roles today, huh?
Yeah.
Well, Brad's playing the part of Cassandra, I'm playing the part of Julie Lupus tonight. So we're reviewing the month of July, and in the month of July, our deficit of 5.2 million was slightly over budget or unfavorable to budget by 5.5%, or 269,000. And included in this, we have our revenues were under budget by $135,000, and then our expenses were also over budget by $135,000. Included in here, I would say of note, would be passenger revenue fares positively. We're over budget. So we've seen that trend throughout the year with only a couple dips here and there. And our non-transportation revenue was under budget due to the sale of 5 buses. We had some depreciation that was left on the buses, but they were expired by the number of miles, so we just had to write that off. Everything else is basically timing, and we always get all that money on all of our grants. And on the expense side, one of the things that I would say is of note, under purchase transportation TD, 120% under budget due to timing. We had to make an adjustment on that, simply because we don't get the bills very timely. So when we do our accruals, we're making an estimate on what they will be. But it's positive that it was under budget, so that's a good thing. So when we look at it on a year-to-date basis, though, we are $1.8 million favorable through the month of July. So that's why when we were talking about the forecasts at the budget hearing previously, we are anticipating by the end of this year to be quite favorable, using only a small portion of our reserves compared to what we had anticipated. So we're doing quite well on the financial front, despite a little slip in the month of July.
Okay, right. All right, and then our financial policies?
Yes, every year I like to bring the financial policies to the committee. There are no changes in the policies this year, but it's something I like to make you aware of. We have 5 different policies.
We have reserves, we have policies for, on the investment policy, which tells Michael and his team what he can invest in. We have a reserve policy where we have 5 different reserves, and a debt liability policy, but we actually have no debt at this point. So it's just in case for the future, but no changes.
Okay, thank you. Brad, is there anything you want to add?
No, and then you have the ridership report, the statistics report there. Statistics are always a month ahead of our awesome finance department, showing you August ridership already, rather than just July.
Wow.
But ridership's doing okay. I think September is gonna be not so great because of the hurricane, or the threat of a hurricane. The days before the weekend, during the weekend, were low. Even though we didn't really have that much of an impact here.
Okay,
I just
questions?
saw that.
Anyone? Anyone?
It did not go down.
All right, thank you. All right, so at this point, I will adjourn the meeting, and I appreciate everyone hanging around a few minutes extra to
Thank you.
get this taken care
Nicely
of.
done.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, Chair. Twice.
You need like music when it's over, so
Yeah.
everyone knows.
Like music? Yeah. It does on the.